Hi, and welcome to Building a Better Memory, a guide for improving your study and memorization skills. In 2 short videos, we will look at 5 steps to make your memory more effective, how to make it more meaningful, visual, emotionally balanced, structured, and fitted around your habits. The first video will deal with the first 2 steps, and the second with the remaining 3. We'll start with a short example and look at the difference between rote learning and elaborative encoding, and then have a look at how we can reinforce memory by chunking, relating material, and by paying attention to etymology. After that, we will look at the visual aspect of memory and see how we can use mnemonic backgrounds and the technique of places and images to create vivid and lasting memories. In a few places, I'll ask you to pause the video, but feel free to stop at any time and give your own memory some space to reflect. Let's try a little memory exercise. Imagine you're studying psychology. For your next exam, you need to memorize a model of human emotions that consists of these 20 items. Pause the video for a moment and think about how you would do it normally. One way of memorizing it would be to go through the list over and over until you remember it. This is called rote memorizing, from the Latin word rota, meaning wheel, because what you're doing is going around in circles until you get it. Rote learning can be quite effective, and you may be quite good at it, but it is a very rigid way of remembering things. When you rote learn, you store information as a long list. This means that each item is only related to another by being connected to what is immediately before and after it. When you lose track, you have to go back to the beginning. You're also not really learning about the emotions at all. When you think of joy, you encode it as something that comes after infatuation and before bliss, and agony follows sadness and is followed by grief. If you forget sadness, well, you're in trouble. Plus, you haven't really learned why these emotions are ordered this way in the first place. But you probably chose a better strategy. You may have read through the list before trying to memorize it. Always a good thing. Then you probably noticed that these 20 emotions can be divided into sections. We have positive emotions, starting with love and ending with feeling proud about something. We have more aggressive emotions, beginning with anger and ending with jealousy. And then we have emotions like sadness and worry. If that was your approach, good job, because what you have done is a first step to building a truly strong memory. You thought about the material first, and then chunked it into manageable size. This is a beginning of what psychologists call elaborate or elaborative encoding, a kind of memorization in which we create a context for the material. The more engaged and meaningful the context, the more easy it is to remember, and the more flexible and meaningful your memory. Now that we know the difference between rote learning and elaborative encoding, let's look at how we can attach meaning to things we are going to memorize by chunking similar material, finding a relationship between things, and using etymologies, or the way words, especially scientific terms, are constructed. Chunking is essentially grouping material into small blocks so that memory can handle them. We have done some of it already when we divided the emotions into 3 groups. But this was an intuitive chunking, maybe a bit too personal. What we need to do is go back to the source of this material and see how it is organized, and then ask questions to make sure we have a good sense of what is going on. This way, what started as a blob of disjointed pieces of information will shape itself into something structured. And with a structure, we have both manageable chunks and a map of how the material is organized. Often these relationships won't be obvious. In that case, follow the structure of your lecture or textbook. But do not just copy something you do not understand. Use your brain. Think about the material and find out how the different parts are related. Is there a causal relationship between things? In our case, do some emotions lead to others? Or is there another kind of structure you can think about? Maybe the material is structured hierarchically, and some emotions are more dominant or more general than others. Another thing that can be helpful is etymology, the knowledge of how a word was created. In the sciences, many words contain Latin and Greek prefixes and suffixes. The prefix ana means up or above, so anabolic will mean an increase in metabolism. Kata means down. Cation is a negatively charged ion. The word crypto will mean hidden. Cryptomnesia is hidden memory. Do you know what hyper means? What about heliotrope? If all else fails, you can create your own etymologies. If the word philogenesis reminds you of your grandmother's philo dough, go for it. In our case, the textbook gives us a pretty clear idea of how the emotions are structured. We have 2 large groups of emotions, positive and negative. There are 2 major positive emotions, love and joy, and 3 major negative ones, anger, sadness, and fear. In this scheme, all other emotions belong under these 5 major emotions. The chunking has its own logic, but in order to better understand it, we should probably find out more about this model. What is the reasoning behind breaking down emotions into positive and negative? Are some emotions related? Are they mutually exclusive? And what about emotions in different cultures? Does this model address how all people feel, or is it limited to specific groups? It's also possible there are competing models of the emotions. Maybe it would be a good idea to learn about these, even if we just glance at an article in Wikipedia. We have looked at making our memory encoding more meaningful by chunking, creating relationships, and using etymologies. Pause the video for a moment and think about how you understand them. Can you think of your own strategies to make a meaningful, elaborative encoding? Now, let us look at the second step in building a strong memory, which consists in visualizing things. Together with making material meaningful, creating a visual mental image of the material is the most effective way of creating lasting and flexible memory. Our mind map of the emotions is already a visual tool, but we can do better than that. In this part of the video, we will look at how we can improve our visualization through using mnemonic backgrounds and the technique of places and images. You already know that memory ties things to images. When you try to remember something, you will often visualize someone or construct a scene. Even abstract concepts can be tied to images in our memory. The cool thing about images is that they can work as storage places for remembering things. When you draw or imagine things visually, you're not just thinking of the things themselves, but also about how they are related to one another in space. Visual representations imprint this relation as a pattern, which helps you hold parts of memory together. Diagrams, doodles in your notes, mind maps or charts, they all can help. Take this image of a plant cell. It contains a lot of information. We see the vacuole, the chloroplast, mitochondria and other parts. But we also see an image, with colors and things arranged in order. When I learn about parts of a cell, I am not just rote learning a list, I am imagining a three-dimensional scene. And when I want to recall this information, I'm not just repeating things in a particular order. I can go over this information in any order because the image is stable in my memory and I can walk through or around it in any way I want. The image becomes a mnemonic background, a solid anchor on which we can arrange a cluster of things we want to learn. When I forget one thing, the image helps me navigate. I may have forgotten the word mitochondria, but I know it was in the top right corner. I can still move down the image and remember where the nucleus is. The most effective mnemonic backgrounds are those that correspond to actual things or places. For the student of anatomy, the human skeleton is a moving map of information about the bones, accessible by simply imagining a body part or even looking at it. Our mind map of the emotions is more abstract, but still corresponds to reality and can serve as a memory background just as well as the plant cell on the image we saw before. But sometimes, visualization is not so straightforward. In that case, we can use an old memorization technique called places and images, or if you want to sound sophisticated, loci et imagines. We'll do a bit of imagining now. If you'd like, this is a good time to take a brief break. Let it all sink in and clear your mind. The basic principle of this technique is to use a visual image that you know very well as the background or place for remembering things you don't know at all. These will be turned into images and located around the mnemonic background. Let's say I want to memorize the first 5 emotions of love, joy, anger, sadness, and fear, and I'm having trouble getting them in my head. What I do know very well is my living room, and I will use that familiar place to house my memory of the emotions, represented as mental images. At the window, seen sideways on the left side of the image, I'll imagine someone in love, looking lovingly into the garden. Right next to them, in the left of the 2 identical windows in the back, I'll imagine another, very joyful person, joyful to see the starstruck lover looking into the garden. In the window on the right, I'll imagine an angry person, maybe an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend pissed off at the situation in the left corner. This leaves us with sadness, which we can represent as someone crouched in the couch on the bottom left of the image, and fear, which I'll imagine as someone sitting in the wicker chair on the bottom right, fearful of what is going to happen when the imaginary door on the right opens. Let's go over this again. We have a person in love leaning out of window 1, a joyful person standing in front of the second window, an angry person at the window on the right, then a sad person crouched on the couch, and a fearful person in the wicker chair. Take a bit of time, pause the video, and imagine these figures as real-life people standing in this room. You'll probably notice this is a very powerful technique. If it is done well, it can literally stamp an image of something into your mind so effectively the memory will be near permanent. So watch out and think before using it, or you may end up like Funes Memorias in the short story by Borges, who remembered everything but was incapable of analytical thinking. Any familiar or even imaginary object or place can serve as a mnemonic background. In the past, people have created literal memory palaces stocked with hundreds of rooms, just like this one in our image. But to make our memory flexible and usable in everyday life, we should probably balance the mnemonic background techniques with more simple methods like charts, diagrams, or just well-structured notes. It helps to build on what is familiar, revise it if we need to, and then reinforce it with good visualization. I studied a lot of medieval history, and I will use the famous story of Heloise and Abelard, two 12th century lovers, as my own visual theme. Abelard and Heloise had ups and downs in their relationship. Abelard got castrated, and both ended up in monasteries, so the story fits very well our theme of positive and negative emotions. I'm now ready to populate my mind map of emotions with images. I'll take the easy way out and use a heart as an image to signify the relationship, and just as the heart has two halves, so my images of fondness also have both Abelard and Heloise present. First, they fondly talk to one another. Then, they are infatuated. The emotion of joy will be represented by Heloise reading a letter from her lover. When she reads it, she's in a moment of bliss and thinks how they will live together in contentment for the rest of their lives. She feels pride when thinking of her Abelard, who is one of the brightest people in Paris. As you have noticed, small stories like the progress of Heloise from joy to bliss, contentment and pride can help to reinforce the visual images set in a mnemonic background. Use your imagination, but always return back to the most important point, the actual meaning of the material. As long as your mental images and backgrounds allow you to understand the material and access it when you need it, you're in a good shape. In this video, we have looked at how we can make our memory stronger by focusing on meaning and visualization. We now know the difference between rote learning and elaborative encoding. We also know that meaning makes memory more lasting, and this can be done by chunking, connecting things through relationships, and figuring out the parts that words are made of. And we can use a mnemonic background to anchor a number of images. In the next video, we will look at strategies that reinforce meaning and visualization. We'll see how we can use emotions, structure, and habits. Before that, though, it might help to see how you can apply what you have learned in your own work. All the best!